I do think there's been a bit of a shift, and I'm sure you've heard this from a lot of the marketing leaders you've talked to, in that it used to be AORs. You would have one agency of record, they would be really entrenched in your business. And now there's a shift towards a more specialized agencies. I think that really allows you to, one, be a good steward of the dollars that you're farming out to agencies and consultants, but also just leveraging their talents in the best way.
This is You Should Talk To, a podcast for busy marketing leaders who are looking for support and tips on getting shit done. In each episode, Daniel Weiner interviews marketing leaders and discusses their experience, successes, and failures around hiring agencies. If you're interested in finding and choosing the right agency partner, then let's jump in.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the You Should Talk To podcast. I am Daniel Weiner, your host, your sponsor, your everything. We are joined today by Kaylin Durham, who is CMO of Aaron's, as well as BrandsMart USA. You Should Talk To pairs brands and marketers for free with vetted agencies and or freelancers because finding great agency partners is a giant pain in the ass. Kaylin, thank you so much for joining us. I know this is weeks, months, years of me begging you to come on this podcast. So thank you for finally giving it and saying yes. How are we today?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Let's jump right in. What is an unpopular opinion or a hot take you have in the marketing world?
Yeah, I thought about this one. I don't know if it's unpopular, but I do think that, and I've talked to a lot of my peers about this recently too, marketing is a mix of obviously art and science, and it feels like we always tend to over-index. That's just because we're human in one or the other. So I actually grew up at a pretty traditional branding agency, and the focus was much more on the art piece of it. How do we connect with consumers by tapping into their emotions? I was specifically working on a Toyota account, so making people feel emotionally connected to a Camry.
The Camry was the car I learned to drive on growing up, so a special place in my heart. Are you responsible for Toyotathon?
Absolutely, no. But that was a big event for us. But then, as I've progressed in my career and specifically been more focused on digital, there's a lot more emphasis on the science piece of it. So how do we truly measure impact and ROI against every single ad dollar we spend? And part of that can be like a slippery slope, right? Because you're holding all channels equally accountable for the same level of return. And so I think the best balance is somewhere in the middle, but I think it's just been a challenge for marketers, especially with so much data at our fingertips more than ever before to strike that right balance.
As you know, I post relatively frequently on LinkedIn. I actually talked about it this morning. One of my former podcast guests, Kyle Lacey, who's CMO at Jellyfish, talked about how marketers are like obsessed with attribution, yes, with all of the data they've gotten. And like his unpopular opinion is that everything can be measured, but everything probably doesn't need to be measured. Do you kind of agree in terms of attribution?
Totally agree. I think that it's also attribution looks very much at one specific part of the funnel, the purchase journey. But I think the best brands are creating conversation with customers. And then, of course, they have demand generation tactics and then demand capture tactics to bring them through purchase. But yeah, all channels just aren't created equally for every step in the funnel.
Sure. You talked about it a minute ago. You started your career at agency. You've moved to brand side. And in a relatively short amount of time, roughly 5 years, you landed in the CMO seat. You're now over not one, but two brands. Tell us a little bit about that journey and what's kind of like the biggest change you've seen or shift in consumer behavior from, beginning to where you're at now.
Yeah, so kind of a two-part question. I definitely grew up, I think we fondly call it an agency rat, which I'm proud of. I started my career again at a branding agency and then moved on to more of a digitally focused agency before transitioning over to brand side. In addition to what I was just talking about with the balance between kind of the art side of it and the science part of it and how we're always kind of calibrating to get that right, the expectations of shoppers are just a lot higher. Think about how much more information and content we have at our fingertips than we even did 5-6 years ago. And so brands are being held more accountable to create really curated and personalized experiences for consumers. I know I had this experience the other, I'm a huge Nordstrom fan. I think they do marketing really, really well. And I got an email from them the other day that I guess it was raining in Atlanta. And so they plugged a raincoat and some cute rain boots, and said, hey, I know it's raining in Atlanta, but let us help you brighten your day a little bit. And so that's the kind of personalization and conversation that customers or consumers are expecting now from brands. And I think that'll just continue in the future. So,
Did you purchase the rain jacket and boots?
absolutely.
Of course. Perfect. You attended a dinner I threw a couple weeks ago with other CMOs and heads of marketing and stuff like that. One of the common conversations I had, at least, was just economies in flux and, everybody's in a little bit of a state of disarray. With discretionary spending low for folks like yourself, what's your advice to other CMOs out there about how to, gain spending efficiency and optimize spend, or maybe cut back if that's your opinion? What do you think there?
Yeah, I mean, oh man, we have this debate a lot. I think there's two schools of thought. There's don't throw good money after bad. Like if the consumers just aren't in a shopping mindset right now, why are we spending incrementally so much more to chase them? And your cost per acquisition is just through the roof. So I think that that's one side of the coin. And then the other side is, okay, well, if a lot of other retailers are pulling out from a marketing perspective, there could be a huge opportunity to win market share during a time like this. And obviously share of wallet is more and more important when consumers are stretched. So you mentioned earlier that I get to work on 2 different businesses. And so we're actually taking a different approach for each, just given the realities of the business and what we're seeing in some of the consumer trends. So yeah, I mean, I think knowing where you get the most value, doubling down on the channels where you feel like you really have return, but then also just being honest with yourself about, okay, do we save these dollars for a rainy day or do we double down now? It's just a strategic decision you have to make based on your brand and where it is in the marketplace.
How do you split your time between both brands?
100 and 100? No.
Good answer if any of your board or your peers are listening.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it fluctuates depending on the time of year. BrandsMart is a traditional retailer. So obviously there are times of the year that are super, super important to us. Whereas Aaron's being lease to own is more of a need-based business. So demand is relatively steady for that. So it'll just kind of depend on where I'm needed the most at any given time.
100% of your time for both. That's totally fair and makes sounds perfectly healthy and normal. What's your overall opinion on agencies? You said you refer. I've never heard agency rat before, so them. Good to hear that. How do they fit into the ecosystem at Aaron's as well as BrandsMart?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we love our agency partners. I do think there's been a bit of a shift, and I'm sure you've heard this from a lot of the marketing leaders you've talked to, in that it used to be AORs. You would have one agency of record, they would be really entrenched in your business. And now there's a shift towards a more specialized agency. So I've got an agency that's really great at digital. I've got another agency that's really good at branding. I've got a whole nother agency that focuses on multicultural marketing. So I think that really allows you to, one, be a good steward of the dollars that you're farming out to agencies and consultants, but also just leveraging their talents in the best way. But I will say the one thing I think we've missed, and I'm definitely biased towards this since I worked with an AOR at the beginning of my career, but having agency representation that really understands your business, especially in a more complicated business like Aaron's, and is really invested and understands what are the true measures of success. How are we really looking strategically to drive the business forward? I think sometimes you miss that when you have specialized agencies. So it's, again, striking that right balance and figuring out how to do that well.
I have seen a huge shift of folks moving from AORs to specialized agencies, usually with like a cluster of services, as I would describe. I think the AOR model is not dead, but dying. Do you think that bigger brands will still remain with AOR models?
No, and I honestly think it's like, it won't just be that brands will move away, but I think it's going to become incrementally harder for agencies to make money doing that service. I mean, because what happens is, I think, I don't know if everybody would agree with me on this, but I think what can happen.
Another hot take?
No, I don't know, but I do think that AORs can, in some cases, become like staff aug. And so brands, I know I'm always looking about my agencies and my line of services. And I'm like, could I do this cheaper if I brought somebody in-house? And so that's where agencies, to keep the business, go to like a staff aug model. And then they're just farming out talent, but not really making any profit on the business. And so I think I think agencies and brands will both kind of realize that a traditional AOR model may not make as much sense.
Yeah, I think after COVID, I think just so much talent was shifted and dispersed like all over the country and world that like, I always use the website example. I'll get a lot of times where I'll talk to brands with like a quote unquote bigger name and they'll say like, oh, we talked to our AOR, we talked to some big agencies and they quoted us like $500,000 for this thing, right? And we talked to some of my agencies and like they're quoting like $100,000 or something like that. And I think there's just so many, especially with technology, evening the playing field, there's so many different ways to do the same thing and arrive at theoretically the same point that it's tough for all agencies, but I think bigger agencies, their pool of who they can work with just based on their pricing is astronomically smaller than independent agencies.
Yep. Agree.
Good. I'm so glad. Most marketers I speak to with your title are getting hit up roughly every 12 seconds. You've told me some funny stories of vendors hitting you up. Is that the case for you? Has it just become untenable?
Yeah, you're talking about by like vendors.
I won't bring up the specific. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but yes, vendors, agencies, tech partners, everybody trying to sell to you because you have a CMO title and they can look up your budget online sometimes and just assume you have $1 trillion to spend it every second of the day.
Yeah. I've got a lot of funny stories. I think we all do have a lot of war stories around that. It was interesting. I have my youngest brother was, I think it's called a BDR. At a tech company, a really large tech company. And it helped me be more empathetic to the sales reps that are calling me, leaving me voicemails and texting me. Honestly, like give a little credit for some of the creativity. I get a lot of like baby come back type of messages. I think probably my most creepy though is I had maybe not creepy, but just felt a little intrusive. I had a vendor a couple of years ago mail me an iPad. And so I open the iPad and I turn it on and all of a sudden it's his face and he's like holding a sign that's like, "Hey, Kaylin." And I was like, whoa. And it's like, this message will self-destruct at the end, but you have to like basically hear my pitch before it does that. And so it was creative, but a little weird,
Did you take,
and then some
take
people
a call?
send me, what?
Did you take a call with that
I didn't
vendor?
take the call. People will send me pictures of their dogs. And then if I don't respond, they'll be like, "It really hurt Barry's feelings that you didn't respond to me."
I know you're a dog person, so I feel like I feel like that's unfair. Playing to your emotions a little too much.
Emotionally manipulative. I'm like, yeah. So anyway.
Is there anything that a vendor can say or do cold when you're not in buying mode to catch your attention? Or, I talk to a lot of CMOs like you who are traveling a ton and their schedules are nonstop every day and they don't have time to take general phone calls or, pitches or anything like that, even to learn about new things. And usually they task like their VPs or directors and stuff for being a gatekeeper to that. Is there anything anybody can do with you to get on your calendar for something cold?
Yeah, I think it's really tough when people ask for my time because it's just pretty limited these days. And so I think when vendors lead with, "Hey, can we have an hour-long conversation?" Or, "Hey, can I take you to lunch?" Or, "Hey, can we go to dinner?" It's going to always be a no, or typically is going to be a no. But what I find really helpful or maybe most compelling is when I can tell they've done their research. So I actually took a call that I was pretty sure I wouldn't even want to use the software, but a few months ago because the sales rep had gone in one of our stores, had identified an issue and some inconsistency in our branding, and then followed up with really specific examples. And to me, that shows that it was interesting enough for them to make the effort. And so I was willing to take the call. We ended up working with them. So I think it's just, there's a lazy way to do it. And I understand that part of it's a numbers game. And again, have a lot of empathy for that. But I think when you're going after maybe specifically someone in more of a leadership position, taking the initiative to show what's important to you is important to me, it goes a long way.
Yeah, I have empathy. When I look back at like some of the messages I was sending people when I was at an agency, they were fucking horrific. So I have empathy for people sending stuff like that. However, I put most of the blame onto leadership because I think they force short term versus long term. Most of the folks in your role that I know and like would consider colleagues at this point are based on like 10 years of stuff and relationship and stuff like that versus like trying to form a bond over email or LinkedIn or something like that in like a week time span, which I think is impossible, but that's what their bosses are tasking them with. So I do feel for them, but I would like a free iPad if anybody wants to send me that, but I can do without the video.
I think as an outtake, you should read all of your worst emails that
I've ever sent. It's so funny now, truthfully, like I'll like go to message somebody on LinkedIn that like has asked me to, or like that I've met. And then I'll like see my message above from like 2015. And I'm like, shit, like now they're going to see that again. I usually call it out. I'm like, I'm terribly sorry for the like horrific message I sent you a decade ago. So I own it. I mean, when I look at it now, truthfully, all of like the sales gurus I follow are like literally probably going through the Danny Weiner LinkedIn messages from a decade ago because everything they're like, don't ever do this. I'm like, yeah, did that. We landed okay. You Should Talk To doesn't send any shitty sales messages now, as far as I know. So, what do we talk about next, Kaylin? In general, when you were looking for an agency, what are you looking for? How can a vendor stand out?
I mean, again, I think it goes back to knowing the business, and I think for me, and I don't know if this is. I think that everybody, like most people would say this, I really want to be challenged. Like I want somebody to tell me I'm wrong.
I hear that often and I take the opinion. I don't know if I agree with that from you CMOs out there.
Yeah. Because we say that and then we're like,
well, I feel like you want to be challenged if you agree with the challenge, truthfully.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I've had one of my favorite agencies to work with. The lead strategist and I disagree a lot on the way that we should approach things. And I think I'm right probably like 86% of the time. But
definitely not, it's not 100. So I'll give you that one.
Yeah, no, but I mean, listen, I think he brings a lot of value because I mean, it's especially, internally, sometimes we can drink our own Kool-Aid and we're just too close to it. You know what I mean? Oh, that didn't work. We tried it 2 years ago. Oh, and so I think somebody to challenge you and say, well, why not? Or, can we at least relook at this is immensely valuable. And frankly, if agencies aren't doing this, why have them? You know what I mean? I don't need a bunch of people to just do what I tell them to do. That's why I have, so.
I take both sides. I agree with both sides. Coming from an agency and selling / being account person, it's a tough thing to do. Like I can think of times where I challenged and was told like, shut up, Danny, we don't care about your challenge. And I can think of times where like, people are paying you to execute and just do what they ask. Even if we disagreed, I won't say who, but I can think of a very prominent brand. My creative director was like, I can't keep telling them no. Like,
yeah,
and we did the work. Eventually, you can give your 2 cents, but if they keep pushing back, eventually you're going to say no, and you need to make money as an agency. So you don't want to get fired as well. So a slippery slope.
Yeah, that's true.
Can you think of a really great agency? Or actually, I'll give you the option. You want to do positive or negativity first?
Positive.
Start positive and negative. Okay. Can you think of a really positive agency experience you've had in your current role, and what has made it so great?
Yes, I'm a big believer, especially post-COVID, where so many of us couldn't be in the same room, of agency summits. And I actually don't think that it should be that the agencies come and have to do all of this work to represent work that they've been doing all year. I actually think it's up to the brands, and that we, the brand, owe the agencies perspective and input into our strategy. And I remember being agency side and that being one of the most frustrating things for me is like, I just didn't have any perspective of what the brand strategy even was. So that's when it can feel like you're just an order taker because you just don't have the context you need. And so maybe a couple months ago, I threw an agency summit with a bunch of our different agencies and vendors. And it was really me talking, I don't like to present, but it was me talking for, basically half a day about here's what we're trying to do. And we need your help to do it. And hopefully getting them excited about my vision and our team's mission. And so that was a really good input. And then the positive agency interaction out of that was one of our multicultural agencies came back with what I thought was a really well thought out and strategic plan for how we could launch a Hispanic campaign in San Antonio. And had they not had, I think, the broader context of what we were trying to accomplish, that may not have been possible. And so, one, I was just impressed by the initiative. But two, I just think brands need to do a better job of setting our agencies up for success. So
you're going to bring a tear to all the agencies people's eyes with that line. No, that's actually
real hard. Yeah.
I was going to say, that's actually, I think, the most unique answer I've gotten, which kind of disproves my entire theory of usually doing these podcasts. Well, usually the answer is never about the actual work. You're episode 29 when this airs, I believe, and you kind of referenced the work. It's usually more about your previous answer, that it's like one person. It's like one strategist, and it's like the process, and they make your life easier. I very, very, very rarely hear when things are positive that it's like nobody references the work ever.
Which is why, that's the only part that matters, really, right? So.
It is at the end, but you don't get there before the other good stuff. That's my unpopular opinion, that I say the work doesn't matter, and of course the work matters, but there's so much other stuff that has to happen to arrive at the good work. And I think, at least in the context of me, so many agencies I talk to over-index by immediately telling me they're great at something, and I'm like, well, everybody tells me they're great at everything they do, and they're the best. What else? People in process, talk to me about that. I think those are the more important things that help you arrive at the work. So I don't know if that's unpopular.
Well, I think I agree with you kind of, but I think one of the things that's also true is that we have kind of, again, over-indexed or shifted towards agency partnerships being all about the relationships, and do they make me feel good, and do they basically date me and take me to dinner and woo me? And I think it's just human nature to want to be pursued and won over and all these things. But the reality is, again, just hire people to work for you that, are on your payroll and then have to, tell you you're great. I mean, really, I don't need to love and just hang out with my agency partners all the time. I want people who I think are smarter than me. And if I ever feel like I'm the smartest person in a room, especially amongst my agencies, then I want new ones. So I think it's kind of the same thing, but.
Interesting. I actually think we disagree on this one. Or not necessarily disagree, because I'm not a CMO. That's the first time, truthfully, in all of these that I hear that usually it is not that they need to be told how smart they are and shit like that. It's more if they don't get along, philosophically, I guess, it's really hard to arrive at good work if you're not I hate to use the word vibes here, but I do hear that often. A lot of brands want the vibe check before doing pitches and RFPs and stuff like that, just to make sure they can have a conversation, especially at the level of that I would put a brand like Aaron's at, that's very, consumer focused and facing and out there and stuff like that. And most people have heard of it, that they find it difficult to arrive at great work if they aren't, I don't know, I guess enjoy speaking to them and look forward to calls and stuff like that to get to the good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think people can be assholes. You know what I mean? There's just the general rule of but I think for me, I'd rather an agency be way less worried about winning me over and way more obnoxiously hyper focused on my customer, to the point where they're hey, you're being selfish. You're just thinking about what you want and what you want to be able to tell the C-suite and what you want to be able to tell the board, and not you're losing sight of your core customer. And that's what I think agencies' jobs are, to be just completely obsessed with the customer and how can we reach them. And the client, it should really just be kind of a conduit to that. So anyways, I get obviously worked up about that.
We're here to get worked up on this podcast. No, I think it's a good point. I do often talk to marketers who give me a ton of information, and I'm is that what your audience, you're not even in your, we just had a power outage on Kaylin's side.
Hold on. Okay, there we go.
Gee, what's going on over there at the Aaron's offices? Now you're gonna after this podcast, you're gonna be some power company reached out to us to sell us something. No, I think I hear that often, that marketing leaders, it's difficult to take themselves out of what they're doing and remind themselves I'm not the target, I'm not the customer necessarily. So I think that's a good point. Let's get super negative and talk about a negative agency experience you've had in the past and what made it so negative.
Oh man. Um,
Even while you're thinking of that, I'll also say, like, you've broken my heart with the strategy. I know I'm not selling to CMOs, but like my entire strategy, my entire life is food and alcohol. Like, let me just buy you food and like have fun with
like,
it.
I think it works on like 9 out of 10. So
Okay, okay.
yeah.
That's my entire. I'm like, shit. I gotta come up with an entirely new business strategy if that doesn't
Valuable
work anymore.
content.
Thank you. Yes, I'm taking notes from this. Now you're gonna get a pod. Now you're gonna get an iPad with my face on it tomorrow.
Yeah. I think, okay, so here's what I think my negative. We have finite dollars, even a brand large like Aaron's. Obviously, we just have the money we have. And I do not appreciate or respect when agencies kind of lose sight of that. And even if it goes against the brand's best interest, are always pushing for their particular channel or, yeah. Because to me, listen, if you can prove to me that it works, whether that's through a true ROI model or a reach model or whatever, I'm going to invest in your channel. But agencies that lose perspective of the full customer journey and what we're really trying to do, and again, just aren't customer centric and are just thinking about how can I get more and more of that pie, that is where I push back a lot and really challenge kind of the strategy. And then if you can't meet me there with the strategy, then I guess kind of feel like it's a land grab. And I that's hard to, I think, come back from. So I had that happen pretty recently. And it was frustrating for me because it felt like, when you're moving really fast and you've got a lot on your plate, like I do right now, it can be really easy to say, glance over a recommendation or a proposal and say like, okay, that, generally looks good. But then if you take the time to really read between the lines, you're like, wait, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? And you realize that some account rep just kind of put it all on paper with the hopes of getting a little bit more of the budget, but it wasn't really strategically sound or there wasn't a ton of thought that went into it. So I think that to me is probably more of a thematic thing, but was also a more recent negative experience.
I hear that often in the context of performance marketing models that agencies are billing on. And if it's percent of spend, it's hard to trust always because agencies will make more if they're suggesting you spend more, and you have to kind of default to the whole trust part of like, is this actually good for the brand, or are you just trying to get a bigger chunk of the pie? I've actually seen a lot of agencies moving towards largely fee-based versus percentage of spend, which has been a differentiator for some of the agencies I work with when I'm talking to brands, because it's just not the norm. Brands aren't used to it, and they seem to like it more. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I mean, we basically work off of fee structures now versus commission percentage of spend, because then again, it's like the amount you're recommending is totally based on, or not totally, but can be biased by
Conflict of interest.
Get out of this. So yeah.
How do you get the best out of your agencies in general? Or what's your recommendations to other CMOs out there if they're struggling to get the best out of their partners?
This is where I'll contradict myself a little bit. I think that one, I had already mentioned that I think investing in your agencies in terms of taking the little bit of an extra time to actually give them the context they need to do their jobs well is really, really important. And I think we can get lazy or just honestly too busy to do that. And then you're not setting yourself up for success or the agencies. But then, in terms of like the vibe check, I do think if something's not working, you cut it early. And I have stayed with agencies longer than I should have because it's kind of a pain in the ass to replace an agency. But I think
not anymore with YouShouldTalkTo,
I know. There you go. Listen, that's a plug. But you know how you go on a date, in 5 minutes if you want to see somebody again. I think that it's not total, or an interview, within 10 minutes, usually, if it's a good vibe. I think it's pretty similar with agencies, and we can just stick it out longer than we need to because we're like, oh, I don't want to have to go through all of this over again. But I think making calls early and often allows you to really invest where you should. And then frankly, have a lot more grace and empathy on the other side, because it's like, okay, maybe that wasn't our best go, but I've invested in you. I believe in you. We had a good initial chemistry and attraction. I'm going to stick with it.
Do you think a negative agency situation can be salvaged, or once like doubt has been, has shown up, I think it's over? You said you cut early typically from agency partnerships at this stage of your career.
I think it depends on what happened. I think breach of trust is really hard. I think that as marketers, we have put a tremendous amount of trust and expect our agencies to be really good stewards of the dollars they're given. And so for me, that's harder for me to come back from. But like, hey, you know what? Agency brings on like a not great account rep, but I've had a long relationship with them. I'm going to kind of give a little bit of room there and just say, hey, don't think this is exactly the right fit, and give them opportunity there. So I think it just depends on what it is.
What do you think is something agencies oftentimes get wrong, or something that you think more agencies got?
I think that there is this balance on the agency side where you want to keep your people motivated and you want to let them work on fun and interesting businesses. And I really respect and understand that, having been on that side. But I do think that there's something to be said for tenure on an account because it helps you, again, build rapport over time. And I think sometimes agencies, in the name of keeping their people motivated, will swap people in and out. And what they don't realize is the impact that has then on your marketing partners, because we're the ones training them, really, right? You can kind of tell them a little bit about the players, but at the end of the day, it's my people who are having to say, no, we do it this way. No, this is, And so I think agencies keeping people on accounts longer would frankly allow them to grow the businesses more and probably be more profitable in the long run.
That is the most common positive and negative I hear about agencies for the most part, is when asking about Jamie Walker, who was the episode before you, she brought up, I think, a PR agency who she's had like such a positive experience with. When I asked her why, she was like, well, now that I think about it, it's like one person. We get along so well. They, and if they left, like, I'd probably follow them and that sort of stuff. And then on the flip side, like, the most negative I typically hear is our account person has turned over 4 or 5 times. Like, it's a pain in the ass every single time. Like, they do good work. But like, that's why, like, in my world, even if the work is great, but they're making their lives not easier, it's oftentimes like, I just can't keep doing this. Like, the work is good, but we can get good work elsewhere. They're making they're such a pain in the ass to deal with because we have this happen every 2 or 3 months and stuff like that.
Yeah. And I think agencies that know, I don't know, it's just balance. Agencies who know how to communicate with you. Like, for example, for me, my agencies know that I'm really bad at email. I'm pretty good at text.
You bad at email?
Yeah, I know. You've had no experience with that.
I am shocked to hear this on this podcast.
I know.
Can you elaborate on that, Kaylin?
I don't. But I'm really good at text, and so, and even my team knows that they will text me and they'll say subject line, whatever and then I'll check. But we just get inundated with a lot of emails and a lot of Slack, and so I like agencies that know how to interact with me in a way that gets my attention.
Knowing your audience, very crucial at every stage of the client agency.
Huh?
At least you got a free iPad. Did somebody send you the Stanley Cup?
Yes, actually. Perfect. But I'm afraid to use the iPad because I'm afraid there's like a camera on it being like.
Yeah, that's not a good look. For that person listening, if they are listening, which they probably are at this point, maybe just the iPad.
Just the iPad.
Doesn't
with
need
like
to be
a handwritten note. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. You made fun of me for giving away too many paper products to people. So handwritten notes don't fly.
At that dinner.
Is the coffee table book sitting somewhere, I presume?
It is. I got a compliment on it the other day.
Thoughtful gifts. That's the ticket. Sometimes they're paper products, What are you most excited in the marketing space at the moment? We've got artificial intelligence taking over the world. I think NFTs are still a thing. We've got events are back post-COVID. What is Kaylin Durham most pumped about?
Oh, I mean, you just named all the ones that are giving.
That you're excited about?
No, I mean, listen, I think for us, we are having to redefine the way a customer shops between walking into a store, going online, interacting with potentially a retail app, et cetera. I'm feeling that in a really big way on the BrandsMart side, which has historically been a brick and mortar play.
Used to love BrandsMart. Shout out BrandsMart.
Still do, right?
I do. I love the brand. I haven't shopped at BrandsMart in ages.
In a while. You should check it out. Got some new branding coming up. It's looking
I
good.
went for like 2 minutes recently, actually, when I stopped at the H Mart, my favorite Asian grocer in Buford, and I walked into BrandsMart for like 2 seconds and got a little overwhelmed and left. It's very crowded, probably because of the good marketing, you know?
It's a lot. We call it a scavenger hunt. Like when you
is.
walk into a BrandsMart, it's like 15,000 products that you,
Yeah.
but great deals. So I don't know. I mean, I know that's not a very sexy answer, but I think it's just true. Like, I mean, I think that
I don't even
AI
know
school-
what was the answer.
just like the optimization of shopping journeys across
Gotcha.
different channels and meeting customers where they are. I think that, I mean, we're using ChatGPT for stuff. I mean, all of that is fun and interesting. But I think, again, just refining some of the fundamentals is hyper focus for us, especially on the BrandsMart side right now.
Yeah, we're all trying to figure out how to give good experiences to our people. What is something that keeps you up at night from a business or marketing standpoint?
How to do more with less, really. Gone are the days of just tons of money being thrown at marketing and there being a willingness to say, like, yeah, let's sponsor a national sports team and not really care about the kind of return, right? We're being held accountable by our CFOs and our leaders, and frankly should be, for, again, I know I keep saying this, but being good stewards of the dollars we're given. And not only that, but I think teams are getting leaner. And so it's how do we really leverage the talents and the resources given to us to make maximum impact for our customers. And then honestly, how do we get out of our own way? So often I just don't think we're customer centric enough. And we have an idea of what we think will work and we chase that down. Or for me, it's managing through executive leadership, right? And so we all have an opinion on what will work, but being a champion for our real customer and saying, okay, how do we use what we have given to us to really reach and engage them in the most effective way possible?
I'm curious because I, of course, have never been a CMO. I have the opinion that for brands like you all, because of how big you are in terms of like foot traffic and web traffic and stuff like that, or what I presume to be web traffic, the only good part about that, I agree all CMOs jobs are incredibly difficult, but you find out quick what works. Like if you think something works, your customers and community are going to tell you really quick if it doesn't work and they don't like it. Do you find that? Like, are you guys making decisions very quickly and testing a ton because you do get that feedback loop relatively quickly versus a small brand who their sample size isn't big enough?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's exactly right. That's one of the things I really love about working on errands. We have...
I could be a CMO. Maybe I'll start a farm.
We have 1,300 stores roughly, right? So what we can do really quickly is create a test group and then test the impact or effectiveness of either a campaign or a new operational model or whatever before we roll out to the entire chain. So that is really fun and energizing and also just brings a lot of validity to the work that you're actually doing. So
awesome. Should we finish with some fun questions, Kaylin?
let's do it.
What was your very first job?
I was trying to think about this. Okay, so I think I've had a lot of jobs. My parents were of the belief that summers were for working.
That's why you have such a strong work ethic now, you know?
Yeah, there you go. I'll thank them for that. I think my very first job, though, this is going to make me seem a little bit more country than I am, but I grew up across the street from a horse farm, and I was 9, and they had a job where you would lead the horses in and out of...
Did you say you were 9?
I was 9.
That couldn't have been legal.
No, it's not. There's this picture of me. I was like, Mom, what were you thinking? She's like, people have gotten so sensitive now. She's like, you were fine.
I worked illegally at a car wash when I was like 14, I think. So,
you know what? Those are the kind of parents we need, though. We need more parents who are like, oh, you'll be all right. So, plus I was the oldest of 5 kids, so she was busy. But I went and mucked stalls and led horses in and out of pastures for a summer. So.
Normally, I ask if you think that made you a better marketer today. I don't know if there's if we can equate anything there, but I'm curious.
Work ethic. I think it taught me
dealing with a lot of horse shit.
Dealing with a lot of horse
shit. That's the clever answer.
Yeah, exactly. And you're never above a dirty job. There you go.
There you go. What would I've been waiting all week for this answer from you. What would your final meal be?
Okay. I think your last guest had something a little bit more interesting. I can't remember.
Wait a second. Did you just admit to listening to the podcast?
I did.
Wow.
I did.
Unbelievable.
But mine would be, there's a little restaurant in Virginia Highlands called La Tavola. And they have
I do like lots of, is it Tavola? Tavola?
Tavola? I don't know.
I say La Tavola. I don't know. Maybe I've been saying it wrong
it's
this entire
Tavola.
time.
Somebody
Okay.
should.
We should Google that. We should chat GPT that. Yeah.
Yeah, we should. But they have this mushroom ragu that I really love, and I'm not even a pasta person, but I actually, the first time I got my first promotion, I went from making $30,000 a year to $33,000 or $34,000 a year, so I was loaded. And I went and I sat at the bar by myself, and I ordered the mushroom ragu and a Matthew Fritz Cabernet, and I thought, like, I have made it. Like, this is it. And because remember, I came from a mucking horse stall, so the trajectory is pretty steep. And now every time I get a promotion, I go there and I do that same thing. So
very nostalgic of you. My first raise, I believe, was from $36,000 a year to $36,500. Shit you not. And I remember my boss at the time gave it to me, and I was like kind of confused. I was like, am I reading this right? Like $500? And he was like, he literally laughed. He was like, I couldn't even keep a straight face, like giving this to
he was like, don't spend it all in one place.
I was like, this is like $4 after taxes. Like, what are we doing here? No, that is great. We love nostalgia.
We love nostalgia.
Yeah. And my final question to you, who is somebody who inspires you either personally or professionally? Don't say me.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. Get a better answer.
You know, I've worked for a lot of really good leaders in my career. And I've honestly had a lot of really great people on my team. This is a cliche, but I'm gonna say my dad. And the reason
cliche.
my dad.
I would say my dad as well.
Oh, there. Okay, great.
Unless Jeff is listening, I don't want to give him a big ego.
In this case, absolutely Jeff.
Yeah.
No, he runs his own ministry, but he has taught me a lot about never taking no for an answer and valuing yourself. And he's a feminist, and I really love that about him. So yeah, he's inspired me. He's never made me feel like I'm not capable of doing anything I decide I really want to do. So
that's awesome. Shout out Mr. Durham.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, that's all we got for you, Kaylin. For everybody listening out there, where do they go for BrandsMart or errands? Are there any deals going on? We've got Memorial Day. You got anything for Memorial Day, 4th of July, anything?
Great one for Memorial Day, especially around mattresses. So go get a new mattress.
Errands.com.
Errands.com.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, and we will talk to you soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for checking out this episode of You Should Talk To. This show is brought to you by the company with the same name, You Should Talk To, a company that helps marketing leaders find the right agency or freelancer for their situation. If you enjoyed what you learned in this episode, make sure to follow You Should Talk To wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, or visit YouShouldTalkTo.com for more information.